This is Owen Tippett, and you're listening to the Sheriff Podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to an exclusive episode of The Sheriff. Guys, today I have a gentleman that I really look up to, so I'm really excited to have this show. This gentleman is a Frisbee ambassador and motivational speaker currently living in Calgary. He holds 6 Guinness World Records, ladies and gentlemen, 12 World Championships, and the Canadian distance record for Frisbee throwing. He also has a children's book that into as well. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Frisbee Rob McLeod. How are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing so great, man. It's really nice to be on.
Well, I'm really excited to have you on, man. And it's for a couple reasons. One is, dude, you just really motivate me, man. When I did my research about the way that you do your motivational presentations, especially in the schools, man, I couldn't get over it. I was telling my mom, I was telling my niece, I just couldn't get over it, man. So I can't wait to get into that. But Rob, I like to get my listeners to really understand my special guests. And I kind of want to go to the beginning. Now, I know we talked before the recording. I had to get exactly where the birthplace was, but you were born in Edmonton, but when you were a really young lad, moved out to the Maritimes. I was wondering if we could speak about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I kind of always knew that I was born in Edmonton. That was always kind of a special, cool thing, growing up in the Maritimes, always ooh, I was born in Edmonton. And, obviously my dad was a huge fan of hockey and watched, Gretzky and all those guys. And I'm sure I watched with him, was never aware of it. And so it was really neat to have that bit of history for myself. But then growing up in the Maritimes, was a special experience, a town of 5,000 people. Sports kind of ruled everything. So I played sports my whole life, skated my whole life kind of thing. And then ended up moving back to Calgary. Knew that I wanted to come back out west at some point. I felt really drawn to it, and ended up going to the U of A in Edmonton first year, and then back to the Maritimes for a bit, and then came back to Calgary. So I've been in Calgary now for almost 17 years.
Right on, brother. But Rob, I'm not gonna let you off that easy, man. We got to talk about this maritime upbringing, because I'll tell you what. Everybody that I know that's from there or was raised there or spent any type of time there, man, that you can say one thing for sure: the Maritimes is like no other place in Canada. It's a completely different culture. Now, I see that you mentioned. I heard that you mentioned about the 500. You say 500 people or 5,000 people?
5,000. Yeah.
5,000 people. So yeah, let's talk about this community, man. What was the school like there? You mentioned the sports, so I'm assuming that sports was a big part of the schooling growing up there.
Yeah, in phys ed class we did everything. I started skating when I was probably a year old. I don't even know. Started swimming when I was really young. My parents just got me and stuff. And what was really cool is there was never just one sport. It was always, well, okay, it's the wintertime, so we're going to play hockey. It's the summertime, let's play baseball or do golf, soccer, track and field, rugby, volleyball. Just tried everything and got to do everything. And so there really wasn't a lot of school sports. It was more just intramurals and phys ed classes. And then I got into, so I didn't actually start playing hockey till grade 6, because I was a figure skater until grade 5. And that's
really
partially of why I get into schools. But it's interesting you mentioned, Maritimes being special. And I've thought a lot about this. And being in Calgary, when I first moved, people are like, oh, you're from the Maritimes, you must be really nice. But what I realized is people in the Maritimes care about what you're doing because they want to tell other people about what you're doing. Out west, people don't really ask you because gossip is not really a thing. To the point where we went to visit my grandparents one time, I think it was, or my great uncle, and we made the local newspaper in Nova Scotia because that was a big deal. It was I was 8 years old or whatever, there with my mom and my sister, and people just like to talk and like to share stories in the Maritimes. So I find people in the Maritimes as nice as people in Ontario, as nice as people in Alberta. It's just the way that they kind of approach it. And not to say that, anyone else is nicer than anybody else. It's just when you're a smaller town, news and things like that, it's a different kind of news. So it's just really interesting experience growing up in one place, living in another place, and seeing all of that everywhere.
I think that's super cool. I've never even really looked at it like that, Rob. So thank you for bringing that up, because it makes so much more sense. So the intention is just is a wee bit different. People in the Maritimes, man, because they want to hear the news, because they want to promote you a little bit. They like to tell stories, so it's like ammo for their stories, right? And that's pretty cool to look at it like that. So now I heard you mention, man, a bunch about hockey and stuff. So let's get right into this, because I mean, Rob, the one thing about my guests that are on my outside the box episodes is that, man, the reason why you're here, brother, is because you're a go-getter. You go for it. You're a big idol. A lot of people look up to you, and a lot of people admire you, especially myself. And those are the type of guests that I have on my show. It's a hockey podcast, but if you fit 9 out of the 10 characteristics, you're coming on the Sheriff, right? So that's why you're here. Now, obviously, you're a huge character, brother. Just to be able to be a motivational speaker, you got to be a big character. You got to have a lot of confidence. You got to be doing a lot of stuff for the better good, right? So I like to talk about the beginnings also with the big character guests, because I know that there's always 1 or 2 people that really kind of shaped that character growing up, which is so important to us, right? So who do you think that was? Is that mom and dad? I know I haven't talked about siblings yet. I haven't asked you yet, which I want to. Did you have do you have siblings? And can we talk about them a little bit?
Yeah, younger sister, but definitely my parents shaped who I am today.
Okay.
And my hockey coaches were a huge part of that growth as well.
Yep.
I think I grew up in the best time possible, because there was no internet, no social media, no cell phones. So when we went on road trips for hockey, it was just, we talked, we listened to, music, we just hung out with each other. And I think there's so much value in that, even in the dressing rooms. There was no cell phones, no photos of anything, luckily for some of us. But no, my parents were so involved. They're super supportive. My mom was that one in the crowd whenever, I'd go in the corner and I was, getting rough with someone. She's like, "Oh my God, don't hurt him." And she was never that crazy mom. My dad actually coached me, baseball, coached me some hockey as well, coached me diving. So they were just super involved with us. It was just really interesting growing up in that space where all I knew basically was like, let's just go play sports. And actually, I don't talk about this a lot, but church was a big part of my growing up. So I went to church every Sunday, sort of left church after high school, but just to be there and to call people Mr. and Mrs., just to have some of those values instilled. I think we owe a lot of how culture and society is built based on religion, and we tend to just blame the bad things on religion, but we don't give credit where credit is due, for sure. So I think if I had not gone to church, if I had not grown up in that space, I would not be the person I am today, for sure.
Dude, I really appreciate you bringing up this topic, because I've actually never got into it with, a fellow athlete, fellow entertainer. And the thing is, Rob, is I was brought up very, very similar to you, man. Like, I went to church every Sunday. I was raised Catholic, and I would, and I do my recordings from my mom's house, so she could even hear me right now. I would get grounded if I didn't go to church, because there was no excuse, because we lived right by the church, right, growing up. And there was no excuse not to go, because there was there was the opportunities to go twice on the Saturday, a couple times on the Sunday. We lived a minute from the church, and, so yeah. And I do believe that helped me as well, brother. It helped me, like, the way, like you said, like manners, just the way that we carried ourselves, the importance of respecting things as a young kid. And I think that a lot of the kids are missing it these days, man, that we got a great opportunity. Another point that I wanted to add on to as well, brother, was what you mentioned about in the dressing rooms and the no internet and the phones, because, man, how important is that in societies now? And us missing that quality time of that human interaction. and not just being in front of a phone or an iPad, that's a big difference. And then over time, it can cause like a big difference as well in our development, in our growth, in our interests. So man, this is great. This is great stuff. I'm so glad that you brought some of these points up. I love to talk about things that I haven't really talked about before. So do you feel that, like, I know that you did mention it, but so now these things, these values that were distilled in you early in life, like going to church every single week, hearing the hymns or the readings, learning, getting educated, singing. Was singing a part of your church?
Yeah, I never really
Well,
sang.
I mean,
I've never really been
we're
a singer.
guys, right? So we're not going to sing as much as the girls, but we had to pretend a little bit, right?
Totally.
Yeah,
And it was just neat to be in that space. And I sort of sum up my church experience with a story that I would ask my Sunday school teacher, did Adam and Eve come before or after the dinosaurs? Like, that was kind of my approach to religion was, I saw the value in it, but it wasn't one of those things where I kind of bought into the entire story, but really just saw so much value in some of those pieces. And actually through the church, I don't know how big of a role this has played, but I took some Toastmaster classes as well through the church. I never imagined I'd get into public speaking professionally later, but I'm sure that helped. And then in schools as well, with like, we had the recipe cards you'd have to write all your stuff down on and do presentations in school. And, definitely always nervous, but I love doing PowerPoints. And so I think it all kind of ties together. It's not like one single event or one single moment was it. It was just kind of all of it together.
Yeah, man. And like, I want to say something, right? Thanks for sharing that. I want to say something just before it goes any further without being said. There is a theme for today's episode, and it's something that you're very, very familiar with, okay? So, ladies and gentlemen, life isn't about finding yourself. Life is about creating yourself, okay? So that's the theme for today. And like I said, very, very familiar to yourself. I got that right off your website, I believe. Now, Rob, when you went to the U of A, University of Alberta, now I saw this video, man, where you were explaining that you knew exactly where you started with this craft that you've just perfected of Frisbee. Now, see, Rob, I'm excited because I'm new to this. I've done a lot of research on you. I've learned so much about Frisbees, buddy, in the last 48 hours. It's just wonderful. You know what I mean? But it's new to me. I want to help. Like, part of what I'm loving about this platform is that we can create awareness. Man, if I didn't know all this stuff about Frisbee stuff, I'm sure that there's others that don't know either. So we're going to educate them, right? What would be the proper term? Frisbee what? You've mastered the craft of Frisbee throwing, Frisbee entertainment? Like, what is it, man?
Yeah, it's so interesting because it is a very cerebral pursuit in a lot of ways. Like, there's a lot of amazing quotes and stories and books and people in general. One of my favorite quotes is, "When a ball dreams, it dreams it's a Frisbee."
I read that. I love it.
And it's just really cool because there's so many things that happen, like balls fall, Frisbees fly. So just the pure act of throwing a Frisbee or watching a Frisbee fly is a very different experience than other things. Shooting a hockey puck, shooting a basketball, throwing a baseball. They're all neat elements to that, but it's just very different when, you can throw a Frisbee and catch your own throw, right? That's something that's pretty cool. Like, I did shot put and discus in high school. The goal is to throw it as far as we could. You can still do that in Frisbee, but now there's another element to it. People that do javelin, they're not going to go out and just throw javelin for fun or be like, hey, like, let's go throw and catch a javelin together. Like, that's not going to happen. Whereas a Frisbee, it's like, you can do that. There's a lot of different things you can do. So for me, it's just really, being that ambassador of Frisbee, trying to understand and educate people what it actually is. And the best way that I've found is to explain Frisbee like track and field. So there's multiple disciplines in Frisbee, just like multiple disciplines in track and field. The people that are doing shot put are probably not going to do 100 meters, and that's totally fine. But somebody like me, I'm like that decathlete or the heptathlete in track and field. I like to do a bunch of different events.
Yeah.
So in some cases, I'm not going to be the best at disc golf, for example, which is the most popular most well-funded. The people know about disc golf the most right now. I'm not to be the best disc golfer because I don't just focus on disc golf. That is one of the things I love to do, but I love to do all these other pieces as well. So, the idea of physical literacy, just really educating and showing people it's possible with Frisbee, that's really the goal, because I played ultimate Frisbee for about 9 years and didn't know what was possible. The internet, social media wasn't that popular from 2001 to 2010-ish.
Right.
But there was still stuff out there. There were still people that I met who knew something and just never told me it, or maybe I didn't listen at the right time, or I didn't hear what they were saying. So now that's my goal, is to at least show people what's possible, at least tell them what's possible. If they don't want to do it, that's totally fine. But like you said, instead of finding yourself, it's creating yourself. And so if you give people the proper tools, then they can go create themselves. And I think that's what's powerful, is if my workshop in Frisbee or me teaching someone about Frisbee helps them in horseback riding, that's great. If it helps them in hockey, that's great. Just gives them a little bit of a different, pursuit, or just an escape from something. It's all kind of tied together, right? There's no best sport. What's the best sport? Depends who you talk to, depends when you talk to them. Someone might love hockey now, someone might love volleyball 5 years from now. You never know. So it's just really understanding where I fit in all of this. And for me, it's Frisbee. For someone else, it's hockey. For someone else, it's, whatever it is.
Yeah, no, exactly. And you couldn't have said it better than that, Rob. I kind of want to go to the time where you first started, training with the disc, with the Frisbee disc. That's a proper term, right? The disc?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like Kleenex. So Whammo sort of owns a trademark on Frisbee, but it's become common domain. So we use the word Frisbee. Disc, flying disc, doesn't really matter anymore.
So Frisbee's a company.
So it's a brand name of Whammo. So Whammo made like the hula hoop, the slip and slide, the hacky sack, and they've also made the Frisbee.
Yeah. Oh man.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, I call it everything Frisbee. You can play the sport of Frisbee. You can also throw a Frisbee. Right. So it's like you play hockey, but you shoot a hockey puck. You play basketball, you shoot a basketball. You play baseball, you throw a baseball. So it's, there's like the implement, the equipment that you use for the sport, but then there's also the sport itself.
So I want to go to the time where you first start throwing, and it's so cool, man. I love that video that you made of showing the park, Sherwood Park, Alberta, just right outside of Edmonton. Now, your aunt and uncle resided or currently reside there, and so showing the park. What motivated you to get that Frisbee, to start throwing? Like how did that all start? Like, I want us to go even before that video.
Sure. So when I went to the U of A, it's in Ardross, and they're on an acreage, so it's like 45 minutes from Edmonton. So every day we would drive to the U of A campus in the morning. I didn't miss a single class my first year of university, which is kind of mind-blowing. I was there for every single class. Didn't do great. It was really tough. Alberta schooling versus New Brunswick schooling, but I was there for every single class. And then we come home. And so in the evenings, it's interesting because I owe a lot of my knowledge to computers to my cousins. They were both in engineering, really, really brilliant people, and they taught me everything I know about computers, or at least, just how to think about computers. And that's how I'm so technologically advanced today with websites and video editing and all this stuff. I do it all myself. But I was like, well, if I don't move my body, this is not going to be good for me. So I have to do something. So I'd run around the neighborhood, just go for a couple of runs, a couple times a week. And then during clubs week, so the U of A, the Butterdome is like the big recreation space, and they had every single club set up. And I remember walking by the U of A Ultimate team. They were selling Ultimate discs. So I bought an Ultimate disc. I had heard of Ultimate in high school. Growing up, we had a Frisbee. I remember we were actually at the beach in Nova Scotia with my sister, this tiny little Frisbee, and we were playing with it. And then it ended up, I missed it or she missed it or something, and it ended up floating away. And I remember just how sad I was that I lost this little Frisbee. And so I'd seen, Ultimate and Frisbee a couple times in my life, but didn't really stick with it. Didn't really, No one was playing it. There was no opportunities. I was busy playing hockey and soccer and everything else. And so when I saw this disc, I was like, oh, okay, interesting. So I bought it and then just started throwing it and just really taught myself how to throw. And so I'd go outside in the back field. There was a massive field in their backyard, and would just go out and just throw a couple days a week, and just ended up falling in love with throwing. And that was really how it started. It was just that pure, simple joy of just throwing a frisbee.
Yeah, and like what I noticed about it was the beauty and the scenic, advantages of, having this time, all this space, this fresh air, the trees, and just whipping this thing as far as you can. And then it got really competitive for you, because then you started challenging yourself, you were explaining, and what it would take you like 5-6 throws to get a certain distance, which now it would take you about 3.5 ish.
Yeah.
About that, right? And then
Yeah.
so you start competing against yourself. Man, I was so impressed learning about that, Rob.
Yeah, like I don't know where that came from. I had never really done that before. Like I love just playing sports my whole life. So I kind of had ideas of games to play and how to make up games and things like that. But yeah, I mean, looking back, I sometimes don't realize just how important that moment was for me, for sure, because there's still things that I do today based on that.
Yeah.
And I just needed to get out of the house. Like for me to be in the house, either doing homework or just computer stuff the whole time, I just needed a break from it. I just needed something to keep me, just some fresh air and just get some exercise.
Yeah. Now, I'm pretty sure that at this point, when you were, challenging yourself and doing all this, and, starting to get better, starting to see improvement, you didn't know that there was 150 ways to throw it, did you? I couldn't believe when I learned that today. I learned that today. 150 ways to throw that disc?
Yeah, I mean, when I started, I found a website that had, how to hold the disc. And I mean, if you think about baseball, there's like 9 different pitches, and it's all based on how you hold the ball and where the ball is within your hands with the seams.
Yeah.
And with a frisbee, it's like you can throw right hand, left hand, upside down, right side up. Just so many different ways of throwing, but I never really knew that. And so I really focused on one throw, which I'm glad I did, because if I would have tried a bunch of different stuff, I may not have gotten as good as I did, as quickly as I did.
Yeah.
And I tried a couple other throws, but it was mostly just throwing a backhand. But there's also a lot of value in some of the throws, because you look at baseball versus softball, a baseball pitcher pitches one game and then they're done for 5 games, whereas a softball pitcher can pitch every game. And so some of the throws in frisbee are not very good on your shoulder or your elbow. And so it's good to make sure you have other throws that are a little easier on your body.
Oh, that's a great point. And I guess that all these points just support of why, if a ball could dream, it would dream it was a frisbee, right? Because a ball can't do any of this stuff, man. Frisbee is like, it's incredible. It really is. Like, when I first saw that quote, I was like, wow, it opened my eyes. And then the more research I did, the more I understood, right? So that's pretty cool, man. I want to get into some fun, exciting stuff right now. I want to get into some of these records, man. I can't get over this stuff. I was on the edge of my seat watching some of the stuff. The first one I want to get into, I'm sure you get asked about it a lot. The one at the Calgary Stadium in front of the 22,000 people. And I don't know, 110-yard touchdown throw, man. Let's get into this, man. How did you find out you had an opportunity to have a platform like that?
Yeah, so interesting. I ended up going back through my email because I knew that I'd reached out to the Stamps before, but I wasn't sure when or what it was even like. And I first reached out to them in 2012. I was competing with Davey Whippet, the dog that I set the Guinness World Record with for the longest throw. Reached out to them in 2012, I think again in 2013, again in 2015, maybe even again in 2017. And just kind of was like, well, I guess it's just not the right timing. I think part of it is I didn't have my brand where I needed it to be. It was just kind of like everything fell into place at the right time. And then I reached out to them again this September, I think it was. And a month later, I was on the field. So it happened so fast. And so it's not an official world record. We're calling it a record because it's the longest recorded instance of it happening.
Yeah.
But it's that video, that moment has done more for my brand than I think anything I've ever done. You know, I've gone viral in the past, but that video, the first week and a half, it was not bad. You know, it was the Stamps promoted, CFL promoted it, TSN, and I was just pushing it as much as I could. I was just getting it out there. And then ESPN picked it up on their TikTok and it went to like 25 million views. And then I got an email from the Atlanta Falcons who were like, hey, would you want to do a halftime show? I was like, yep. And then 3 days later, I booked my flights. And then, you know, a couple weeks after that, I was on the field in Atlanta. I've gotten emails from a minor league baseball team. I've gotten an email from a soccer team, professional soccer team. So, you know, it's just been, and I've talked to the guy at the Stamps who also works for the Flames and the Roughnecks, all part of the Calgary Sports and Entertainment. And it's just like the way it was filmed, the throw itself, the pink jacket on Sailor, the announcer calling it a touchdown, just like everything was perfect and couldn't have asked for it to be any better. And so it's just really interesting because I failed a lot. And in that moment, it was one of those rare moments where you're actually in that flow state where there's 22,000 people, but you're not worried about them. You don't even know what music's playing. You don't even know what they're saying. It's just like, this is my job. I just need to pick up the Frisbee and throw it to the dog. He came back to me. I'm like, okay, let's try another one. Let's try and throw it a little further. And it was over before I knew it was had even started kind of thing. And it was just like, wow, did that actually happen? So yeah, just an incredible opportunity that the Stamps gave me. And obviously, you know, I still had to show up and do it, but just for them to actually give me that chance was something I'll never forget.
So, and thanks for sharing that, Rob. Now, the throws at the Stamp Stadium, now that was with that wasn't with Sailor, right? That was with another dog, or was it Sailor?
That was Sailor at the Stamps
It was
game.
Sailor.
Yep.
Okay, so now this is what I'd like to talk about. I was gonna get into some other stuff, but I want to talk about Sailor. Now, how old is Sailor?
He is about 6.5.
Okay, so Sailor's 6.5. Now, Sailor is your dog?
No, so I've thrown and competed with dogs for about 11 years now, and it's
Okay.
always been through a friend of mine. She has some dogs, and so she's kind of, you know, the trainer, and I'm kind of the jockey if you think of like the horse world.
Okay.
And
sorry, go ahead. Yeah, no, sorry, go ahead.
And it works well because I travel a lot, and people in the dog world are like, well, just get your own dog. And I'm like, yes, but I don't just do dog sports. I do disc golf. I do other stuff. And when I'm going to as many schools as I do, to just leave the dog at the hotel or in the car is not really fair.
Yeah.
And so it's worked well, but there's been some interesting things happen recently with the Falcons that I'm like, you know, maybe it makes sense now to have a dog everywhere I travel. So it's like I'm auditioning dogs. So I look at it as I'm performing with somebody, and I give other dogs a chance to be the touchdown dog. Because, you know, if Sailor's not available, if it's too cold or too hot for him to fly, then what do I do, right? And so it's really important, I think, for me to figure out some backup plans. But there's no greater bond than with a dog, and they can't communicate with you. But when I throw a Frisbee, he catches it, brings it back, it feels like we're communicating, that we're just totally in sync. He's working for me. I'm trying to give him the best throw I can, and it's a really cool part to be a part of that team, I guess, in that way.
Yeah, man. Because I'm a big dog person. Like, I've had a dog like for most of my life, right? And I just think it's so cool to be able to share like a very competitive thing, and like with a dog, right? Like, I don't think you can, and like you said, the connections are like no other. Like, obviously everyone knows the term like a man's a woman's best friend, right? And it's really true, right? And so if you get to work with your best friend, man, that's unreal, right? I'm very impressed. Very impressed. Yes, please.
And something cool with it too is, you know, to compete in dog sports, you really see just how incredible it is for a dog to have a purpose, and then it makes you want to have a purpose. And so I think that's something that there's a lot of people in life that don't have a purpose. You know, too often we talk about find happiness. Well, happiness is an emotion, right? There's days you're going to wake up, you're not happy. Does that mean, you know, life is not worth living? No, it's find that purpose. And so to work with a dog who has that purpose, you give them a job. It's like, okay, well, as a human, what's my purpose? What's my job? You know, it may not be the job that you go to, but it might be something outside of that. And, you know, and there's a lot of talk. I did an interview with a friend of mine, and his passion is ultimate Frisbee, but his hobby is disc golf. And so he's saying if his hobby can help fund his passion, then that would be a pretty cool thing. But his passion will always be ultimate. And so it's like, you don't want to monetize your passion necessarily, but maybe you can monetize your hobby. And then it gives you the ability to do things outside of that.
Yeah, buddy. Now, passion. Some of these words that you're using, it's getting my juices flowing. Now I want to talk about the motivational stuff because, man, it's pretty impressive to be in the Guinness Book of World Records, right? But what's even more impressive is to be able to change people's lives, Rob. And that's what you're doing. Okay? Now, first of all, I want to point out a couple things because I love letting the listeners know like details like this. When I was looking up your motivational speaking stuff, this is what I gathered, okay? Your style, buddy, is like no one else, okay? Imagine somebody just entering a space where there's people that are coming to hear them out. Now this guy is able to capture your attention like nothing else by showing you something that you've never seen before. That's what I got out of it, man. Watching those demonstrations of you in the gym, especially the first time ones, one shot, like what I saw in the video today, I've never seen before, Rob. I'm sure those kids in the school have never seen that before. Boom! You get their attention. You're able to send your message with such direct and productive like manner. Like I can't get over it. Like, how did you think like to put all that together? To me, it's like genius work. Am I on the right path here?
Yeah, it's evolved a lot. Like I've done over 400 schools now, and I used to have, you know, really nice presentation. So I'd have my laptop and a projector and, you know, videos and audio and all that kind of stuff. And then after my presentation, I'd have the kids move to one side of the gym and then I'd do a Frisbee demo. And there was a bit of a disconnect with that because they're listening to me talk for like 30 minutes or whatever. And then I do Frisbee for 15 minutes, but they're getting restless and the message wasn't connecting as effectively as it could. And so I ended up hiring a speaking coach a couple of years ago. And she asked me to record what I did for her. And she's like, why don't you combine the talking and the Frisbee? And so now it's a message and then a demo, message, demo, message, demo. So I don't use a projector, no technology at all anymore, which I really love. I can just walk in and start. I don't have to have the kids move, you know, around the gym. They set up once and that's it. And a lot of it comes from, you know, so Dude Perfect has really popularized trick shots, and we know that they don't make it on the first try. Most of the time, there's sometimes they do, but a lot of times it takes hundreds of tries, sometimes days, but there's no audience, right? It's not live. And so what I really wanted to do was, let's do this live. And if I miss it, then I miss it. But if my message is, let's learn from failure, let's not give up, let's keep trying, what better way to show that to them than do it in person? So here's someone that has 6 Guinness World Records, is in the Guinness book twice. He can't make it on the first try. Does that mean he's going to quit and go home? No, but it's at least try. And then if those kids can now take that idea back to their math class, I don't get this, you know, question on the first try. Does that mean I should give up on math? No, try it again, try it again, try it again. So that's really where it comes in, is just if people can live life with that mentality, that idea of a growth mindset, then I think, you know, they'll experience a really wonderful life. And I think if people are afraid to try things and don't even try, well, not even trying is failure in itself, I think. So, you know, at least try. And I think sometimes we pride success a lot, which is a good thing. But I think sometimes we also celebrate, you know, we don't celebrate the people that are actually making an effort of it. Like if you go to the Olympics and you don't win a gold medal, you're not on the podium, then people forget about you. But there's still a story in that, especially when it's these sports where it's like between first and fifth place, it's like 100th of a second or something, just wild, right? Yeah. It's like, you know, you went that far, and then all of a sudden we just forget about you. Like there's a really good documentary called The Weight of Gold that talks about just the struggles that Olympians have because of that. And so I think we can apply a lot of that to our own life and say, okay, well, if I'm doing this thing, if my only measure of doing it is the success of actually achieving it, well, I'm giving up on everything else. Like the Falcons game, I didn't even get to try, right? Sailor got spooked before he went on the field. Didn't even get to try and throw it to him. We were just trying to get him back and trying to calm him down. Was that a failure? We didn't fail. You know, it was an unexpected thing happened. When you work with dogs or horses or animals, that unexpected things can happen. And so it was a really good learning experience for me, but it's like I still got booked at an NFL game. I still got to perform in front of 69,000 people. Just these moments in life, it's like if everything goes exactly to plan, if you win at everything, then you're gonna start not winning at everything, because it's like, what's the point of even doing it if I'm gonna win? I think what keeps us hungry, what keeps that passion fired up is I have to keep trying. I have to keep winning. I have to keep losing. I have to keep learning from that. So, it's hard because the more that I try, the more that I do things, the more that I fail. But I think I've seen this on TikTok a lot actually recently. Some of my videos have really been, getting a lot of views because people see the authenticity. If I'm doing a trick shot by myself and no one's around, people get it. But if I do a trick shot with 400 kids watching, then they're like, whoa, that's different. They don't see that very often. And then, like you said, when I go into a school, I know that 100% every single person in that school is going to see something they've never seen before. Even if they played Ultimate, even if they played disc golf, there's still going to be something I'm going to show them that they've never seen before. And to me, that's a really cool moment. It might be the first time they've seen it. It might be the 5th time they've seen it. And maybe it's just another little notch to get further down that road in their journey. Maybe it's their first time learning it, and now they can explore and go from there. So just to have that, it's an honor, I think, in a lot of ways, to actually be able to do that.
Yeah, man, it must be an honor because it's so special. It's so unique, right? It's incredible. Now, okay. So before we move on here, there's a couple things I want to touch up on. First is now in the Stamp Stadium in Calgary, we mentioned 22,000. Now I was going to ask you, but you're so good at giving information. You mentioned it. 69,000 were at the Atlanta Stadium, the Falcon Stadium. Wow, man, 70,000. That's a huge crowd. So now that may have been a pretty big part of the reason for that, for Sailor getting the cold feet, right? He's probably never been around a crowd like that, would you say? I mean, I don't think any of us really have, unless you're an NFL quarterback, right?
Yeah, and it's one of those things where a lot of times you have to fail that first time. Like, I remember, so I won the world overall disc golf championship. So it's disc golf at an overall tournament.
Okay.
And so in 2013, I was in the finals, didn't perform very well, and I was nervous. There was, not many people, but like 100 people following. 2015, I was in the finals again and ended up winning it because I was used to that gallery. I was used to people watching.
Yeah.
But it's like, how do you learn? How do you get better at it? You just have to do it. I have a lot of people ask me all the time, like, how do I get better at speaking? You just do it. I was nervous the first time. I still get nervous a little bit, but speaking now in front of 500-600 kids is not a big deal anymore because you've done it enough. But you have to do it. You can't, there's no magic pill. There's no secret trick or formula. It's like, you just got to do it. And you know that from hockey, like it's the more that you do it, just becomes more automatic. And then all of a sudden there's another thing that becomes a little bit nerve wracking that may not for other people. But yeah, no, it was amazing. The stadium was so loud. They had the roof closed, so it was super loud in there, and just the energy. And I mean, everything went well, except then that one thing happened. But again, just a huge learning experience. And if that hadn't happened, then I would, I'd just keep doing what I've done. And so those things happen, then you realize, okay, well, let's take a step back and how can I improve what I'm doing so I can be even better and more prepared for next time.
Yeah, man. So because we're talking about it right now and because it's so incredible, let's say there's an owner or a executive, whatever, of some stadium that's hearing this and is loving this idea. How do they get a hold of you to do the throw on the stadium, to do the touchdown? How are these people going to do this?
Yeah, I mean, just search Frisbee Rob. Frisbee Rob.
Frisbee Rob. Yeah.
Twitter, Instagram,
Simple. Very
website,
simple.
everything. Yeah.
Okay, and it's Frisbee Rob on all platforms, right, Rob?
Yeah, surprisingly, no one else had taken that name, so that was good.
Really, really good, man. That's really good. And okay, so now back to the motivational speaking, Rob. Now, what impressed me the most is how you do is your style. Like, remember I said your style is like no other. I wasn't just talking about people being able to see something that they've never seen before, but just your whole outlay of how you do the message, the core messages that you do. Physical literacy, resiliency, kindness, and unplugging. I mean, dude, you're hitting it right on the head here, man. You know what I mean? Your assembly combines the 4 core messages with Frisbee demos and games. And at the end of every assembly, you challenge your students to take the unplugged challenge. During the Frisbee demo, you show them a trick shot that is hard, and you usually fail multiple times before finally making the shot. Perfect example of life. Perfect example of trying to accomplish a goal. Everything, man, you're doing it. How do you did you get, like, this is all you? You got help with this? Well, how did you figure out this blueprint, man?
It's so much just, dropping the ball, so much of like things landing short. Like, I remember in one of my early presentations, I had a bunch of pictures of me just saying like Frisbee's allowed me the ability to travel. So I showed a picture from Sweden, a picture from China, then I had a picture of me in Mexico. And it was next to an agave plant, which is what they make tequila out of. And I made like a joke about, this is an agave plant, you kids wouldn't know what it is, but the teachers would know or something. And then I got input that one of the teachers said that was inappropriate. I'm like, yeah, okay, maybe it was, maybe I'll take it out. So it's just little tiny pieces like that where they're like,
okay,
you said too much of this. And I had, because I love presentations, I love technology, my presentations evolved a lot over the years. And I had, in the beginning, I had videos from like Steve Jobs. It's all about, he's like, it doesn't matter, what it is, if it's religion or whatever. He's like, you just got to believe in something, right? And so there's a lot of pieces of that. And he talked a lot about connecting the dots. And so a lot of it is, if I want to talk about kindness, for example, I would go read the book on bucket filling. So I knew that a lot of the teachers in those schools had read the kids' book about bucket filling, but they hadn't actually read the book that all the research was based on for bucket filling. So I knew when I was talking about kindness that I knew more than probably all the teachers in that school, if not most of them. So then I could speak with confidence about it, because if they challenged me, then I could say, okay, well, I read it in this book and this is what they talk about. So that was a lot of it, is I didn't want to talk about something unless I had read about it myself. But then sometimes, yeah, some of the messages just didn't seem relevant anymore. And a big thing I learned, so I used to call it anti-bullying. I used to talk about bullying and talk about bullying versus peer conflict and the differences. And then I was trying to get into some schools in Saskatchewan. I think it was Saskatoon, actually. In Saskatoon, they basically said, if you have the word bullying in your presentation, you're not allowed in our school, because the research shows that if you talk about bullying, it increases bullying. And so what I started to learn from that is, well, if you're on a breakaway, for example, if you're like, don't miss the net, you're going to miss the net. If you're like, just score. So it's whatever we focus on will happen. So if you want more people to be kind, let's focus on kindness instead of anti-bullying. Oh. And so I connect that with, if I'm throwing and playing catch with a Frisbee, or if I'm trying to throw it in the basketball net, if I'm telling myself don't miss, I'm thinking about missing it. If I'm saying just make it, then I'm thinking about making it. So yeah, just those little tiny switches, have really helped a lot. Yeah. But I still see like TELUS has like this anti-bullying thing, and yeah. And just there's not enough people that get it, because it's not like an organization, maybe their people didn't go through the learning that I went through. Like, to me, this was hundreds of hours, thousands of hours, listening to podcasts, audiobooks, talking to teachers, principals, administrators, phys ed teachers, parents. And the same thing with unplugging. Like, when I first started the Unplug Challenge, it was go a day without a screen. Well, that's not realistic. So then it was like, set better limits on screens. So no screens in the bedroom, no screens at the dinner table, no screens an hour before bed. Just make it very simple. And so, that's something I haven't been doing a lot of because of COVID. Hard to really unplug with COVID, but, I want to get back to that, where it's setting better limits again. And so, Yeah, it's been a really interesting journey to get where I am today. Like there's no way that I could have just, if someone gave me those messages and said, go talk about them, I would have had to go through all those other pieces first. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey for sure. And I'm pretty like solid with where I'm at now, I think. Innovation wise, like I'm really happy with the messages. There might be a couple other things I add on, but also think sometimes you have less evolution if you're not actively building a presentation. So sometimes I think it's been more challenging in a way for me to actually do it the way I do it now, because I'm not constantly tweaking and adding and removing. It's just talk about this, do this, that's it. So in a way, I need to go back, I think, to some of that innovation.
So yeah, and I appreciate you sharing that, Rob. So over now, I don't know how recent the article was where I got this off, but 400 schools, over 400 schools, over 135,000 students. Is that the number still, or has it increased?
Yeah, no, that was it right around when COVID started. So I'm averaging now about 100 schools a year before COVID.
Yeah.
But since COVID hit, I've done, I think, maybe 20 schools in the last 2 years. It's been so slow. Yeah.
Well, it's been almost impossible, Rob. Right?
Yeah.
It's really caused a lot of, it seems like it's affected some of the most important things, like, how hard it is to see your own doctor. How important is that? How not being able to see presentations that you've never seen before about kindness and improving your life. And you know what I mean? Like, these are the things that are being taken away from us. These are the things that we're now learning how valuable they are, because there's the old, you don't really know how good it is till it's gone type of thing. And trust me, man, the schools need you, brother. The schools need you really, really bad, especially while I don't know what's going to happen now. I thought we were recovered, man. We were down to, Ontario and Quebec are always the worst, but, in Ontario, we were down to like 100 cases a day. Now we're back up to 4,000. So, like, I don't know what's going to happen, Rob, but once this gets resolved, dude, we're going to need you more than ever, because mental health, all these problems, they're at record highs, my friend.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Record highs. And I know you know this, but I'm letting the listeners know how important your work is, because it's almost priceless, man. Right? And so that was another reason why, man, I'm so happy to get this guy on, because, dude, the records and Guinness Book of World Records and all that, the world records, all that kind of stuff. I mean, that's super cool. I'm a competitive dude. I love that stuff. I want to pick the man's brain that's in the Guinness Book of World Records, right? But the motivational speaking is what impresses me the most, Rob. And that's the value that you bring to this world in the most capacity, in my opinion, brother. It's priceless. This world needs more Robs. And to be honest with you, brother, I'm really trying to get into it. Like, I'm really trying to do it. Like, I'm starting it in the new year. I'm doing, like, how you got to put yourself out there. You got to, you know what I mean? Do things that are probably worth a lot of money, but they're for free because you're trying to get yourself off the ground. That's what I'm doing. And brother, like, I'm really going to be learning a lot from you now, because I'm going to be watching a lot of your stuff, because I'm so impressed. I think it's so productive the way that you do it. I think the outline is incredible, and I've never seen anything like it before, right? So you've gained a huge fan right here, man. I'm your biggest fan already, buddy. You know what I mean? And that's just from learning about you the last couple of days. So yeah, dude. I know that I was running a little bit late today, and I appreciate your patience. I appreciate the insight that you had with your stories. Man, I'm loving the topics that we got into, and I know that the listeners appreciate it so much, because that's what we try to do here. We try to talk about things that other shows like don't get into, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, so like one of the last things I wanted to ask you, brother, was, I was going to say, you started it in 2013. You have over the 400 schools, 135,000 students. Do you remember the first one?
Yeah, it was awkward because I didn't really know what I was doing, but I had the ability to make a presentation, which I love doing. I was using PowerPoint at the time and threw a bunch of videos in, and So I did a presentation at the Sunflower Festival outside of Edmonton and just talked about my Guinness World Records. I had Davey with me at the time. So Davey was the one that I set the Guinness record with for longest throw. I had some of my world championship medals with me. And I think I had one of my Guinness certificates, and I wasn't in the book yet, but I had one of my certificates. And so just talking about that. And then I ended up doing a Frisbee workshop outside and didn't really know what I was doing. I mean, now I think I've run over 6,000 workshops, so I can just do it without even thinking. And sometimes when I start to think, then I make mistakes. And but yeah, it's just, all these different pieces in my mind. And so looking back, it was just really interesting how it started. And it's been such a long journey. Like, if I would have just done it randomly once every couple weeks, I never would be where I am today for sure. And a friend of mine said something, it was really humbling. Again, some people come into your life and they're maybe only there to say that one thing to you. And she said that, Frisbee is your vehicle, but she's like, really, it's not about Frisbee. Nobody really cares about the Frisbee. You got to have something else. And so the Guinness World Records get me in the school, but it could be lacrosse, it could be badminton. It doesn't matter what the sport is, because ultimately, if I'm at a school for one day, they still have like 200 days of other sports to do or other activities. And so it's like, what message can I leave? And that's really what I try and do is, if I go into a school, if they're paying me money to come into a school, what can I leave behind? Whether it's a message, whether it's a handout, and not making it more work for them, right? I've seen other presentations where the schools have to do all this work ahead of time, and then you leave them with stuff. And I used to run the Unplugged challenge, and it would require a lot of effort from the schools. And I'm like, well, that doesn't work very well. I don't want to say, pay me money, but then you have to do all this other work. And so again, it's just learning all those connections and how do you have as much impact as possible if you're only there for an hour, if you're only there for half a day or a day. And it's been a really interesting journey that way. And there's definitely a lot of things that I still have to learn, but so much of that is, schools don't like free. They're like, well, why are you doing it for free? And so if you charge them even a little bit of money, then that's better than, charging too much. And then as you go, you can start charging a little more. So, it's been, sometimes I don't take the time to look back because you get so caught up in what you're doing. But opportunities like this are so powerful for me because they make me realize, let's slow things down, let's reflect, let's kind of dig back into things, and it helps you continue moving forwards, I think.
Yeah, dude, man, it's so cool. It's so cool. Just to lighten things up a little bit before we go, you did say that you're a hockey guy, right? And so, have you ever gotten the comment that you look like the Lindros brothers?
No.
You never gotten that?
No, but I have heard from a lot of people
Brett than Eric.
I've heard from a lot of people that I'm not really built like a Frisbee player, and because I was hockey and rugby and those kind of things. But never been told that. That's interesting.
Yeah, dude. To me, I don't know if it's because we're looking each other right on, but to me, you look like Brett Lindros, man. If Lindros, I don't even know if they have other siblings, but if Eric and Brett had another brother, and then you walked out, I'd be like, yeah, hey man, how you doing, Lindros?
Well, it's like,
but they are specimens, so it's a compliment. Yeah. Those guys are in great shape, man.
No, I appreciate that. It's like when you were talking about the Hunters and you thought all the Hunters were all brothers, and it's like,
yes, I did. I thought Tim was Mark and Dale's brother, man, for the longest time. And I knew it's because I knew that there was three, and the third brother is like, he's not really talked about that much, like you know what I mean? And then I'm like, yeah, it must be Tim. Tim must be the guy. And then I did my research, man, and I was like, wow, am I ever lucky I saw this? Because if I had made that mistake in the show, it would have been a problem. So, yeah, dude. Hey, man, I appreciate that you know that.
Yeah, I was checking it out.
That you listened, right? I appreciate that, man. That's super cool, dude. So, dude, I mean, I sound like I'm thanking you a million times, but it's just all genuine. I wanted to thank you again for coming on to the show, buddy. I wanted to thank the listeners for tuning in to another episode of The Sheriff featuring special guest Frisbee Rob McLeod. And we're going to sign off now, guys. Woo!